The fog was thick that morning in the foothills. A hiker was missing. The trail looked empty, but then one rescue dog froze. Ears low, muscles locked, and without waiting for a command, he took off running. He didn't bark. He didn't look back. And where he led them, through brush, past a ravine, up into the pines, they found a door. And hanging just behind it was something no one on that team will ever forget. Before we get into the full story, tell me in the comments below where in the world you're watching from. And if you love extraordinary animal stories like this one, check out our other channel, where the heroes are cats instead of dogs. Make sure you're subscribed over there too. The link's in the pinned comment. Let's begin. The morning mist clung to the cold pine mountains like a wet blanket, transforming the familiar trailhead into something from a ghost story. Sergeant Tom Braley pulled his department SUV into the gravel parking area. The headlights cutting through, fog so thick he could barely make out the trail markers 20 feet away. His breath formed small clouds as he stepped out, the October air carrying that sharp bite that warned of winter's approach. 23 years of mountain rescues had taught Tom to read the signs. The way fog settled in the valleys, how the wind carried sounds differently in dense air, the particular smell that came before a storm. This morning felt wrong in ways he couldn't articulate, the kind of wrong that made experienced searchers trust their gut over their equipment. The silver Subaru Outback sat alone in the lot, its paint dulled by 3 days of mountain weather. Tom had seen this scenario too many times. A single vehicle, keys locked inside, owner nowhere to be found. But something about this one felt different. Maybe it was the hiking boots lined up neatly on the dashboard, or the half-empty coffee cup still sitting in the cup holder, or the way the car seemed to be waiting for someone who would never return. Leah Moore, 32 years old, freelance photographer, avid hiker. Her sister had called Monday morning when Leah failed to show up for their weekly coffee date, something she'd never missed in 3 years. The story was familiar. Weekend solo hike, planned return Sunday evening, phone going straight to voicemail since Saturday night. She's not the type to just disappear, her sister had insisted over the phone, her voice tight with worry that had been building for days. Leah plans everything down to the minute. She carries backup batteries, emergency shelter, enough food for twice as long as she'll be out. She texts me from every summit, every major landmark. Something's wrong, Sergeant. Something's really wrong. Tom studied the trail map posted on the weathered information board, its plastic covering fogged with condensation. The cold pine loop was 11 miles of moderate terrain, challenging enough to be interesting, easy enough for an experienced hiker to complete in a day. Leah had told friends she wanted to photograph the fall colors from Eagles Peak, the highest point on the trail. In good weather, it was a beautiful hike. In the fog and rain they'd had for the past 2 days, it could be deadly. The sound of tires on gravel announced the arrival of the search and rescue team. Tom watched as 4 volunteers climbed out of a modified pickup truck, their movements efficient despite the early hour. He recognized most of them, retirees and locals who'd been doing mountain rescue longer than he'd been alive. They knew these mountains like their own backyards, could navigate the trail system blindfolded, and had pulled more than their share of injured hikers out of impossible situations. What caught his attention was the 5th person. Deputy Carly Reese stepped out of the passenger side, her sheriff's department jacket pristine despite the rough terrain ahead. She was young, maybe 26, 27, with the kind of intense focus that marked her as either very good at her job or very new to it. Beside her trotted a golden retriever whose coat gleamed even in the dim morning light. "That's our tracking team?" asked Jim Patterson, the most senior of the SAR volunteers. His tone carried the skepticism of someone who'd seen too many weekend warriors with undertrained dogs who caused more problems than they solved. "Kip's certified," Carly replied simply, not rising to the implied criticism. She knelt beside the golden retriever, checking his specialized search vest with practiced efficiency. 2 successful finds in the past 8 months. He knows his job. Tom had reviewed their files the night before. Sitting in his kitchen, with a cup of coffee and growing concern about the weather forecast. Deputy Reese had transferred from K-9 patrol after her previous partner retired, specifically requesting assignment to search and rescue. It was an unusual career move. Most handlers preferred the predictable routine of drug interdiction or building searches to the physically demanding uncertainty of wilderness work. Kip was her first SAR dog, a career change that raised questions about motivation and experience, but their certification scores were impressive, and they needed all the help they could get. The mountains were vast, the weather was deteriorating, and every hour that passed reduced their chances of finding Leah Moore alive. The fog was starting to lift slightly, revealing the dark wall of pine trees that marked the beginning of the trail. Wisps of mist drifted between the trunks like restless spirits, and somewhere in the distance, a hawk's cry echoed through the silence. Tom gathered the team around Leah's vehicle, speaking quietly despite the fact that they were alone in the vast wilderness. "Vehicle's been here since Friday evening," he began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd coordinated hundreds of these searches. Park ranger confirmed it in his log. Arrived approximately 6 p.m. Nothing unusual noted. No signs of forced entry, no indication of foul play. Her gear's gone. Backpack, camera, hiking poles. Everything suggests she started the trail as planned. He paused, studying the faces around him. These were people who understood the difference between a simple rescue and something more serious. The statistics weren't encouraging. After 3 days in mountain terrain, especially with the weather they'd been having, the chances of finding someone alive dropped significantly with each passing hour. "We'll start at the trailhead," Tom continued, unfolding a topographical map and spreading it across the hood of his SUV. "Standard search pattern, radio check every 15 minutes. Weather's supposed to clear by noon, but if this fog gets worse, we come back down. Nobody becomes part of the problem." Carly had been listening while she worked with Kip, establishing the scent baseline from Leah's car. The process was methodical, letting the dog investigate the driver's side door handle, the area around the vehicle where Leah would have walked, even a hair tie she'd left on the dashboard. Kip worked with professional focus, his tail wagging slightly as he processed the various scents, sorting through days of accumulated odors to isolate what they needed. "He's got it," Carly announced, straightening up and checking her watch. The process had taken longer than usual, which sometimes indicated a complex scent picture, multiple trails, environmental factors, or contamination from other sources. Tom nodded toward the main trail entrance, a well-maintained dirt path marked with wooden signs and colored blazes. "She would have started there, right? That's the only way to access the loop trail." But Kip wasn't interested in the main trail. Instead, he pulled toward the left side of the parking area, nose low to the ground, following an invisible path that led away from the marked trailhead entirely. His behavior was confident, purposeful, not the random investigation of a dog following interesting smells, but the focused tracking of prey. "That's not the trail," Jim Patterson observed, his weathered face creasing with confusion. "That's just Forest Service maintenance area. Nothing back there but old logging roads." "He's not following the trail," Carly replied, her voice carrying a confidence that made Tom take notice. "He's following her scent, and she didn't go that way." The realization hit them all at the same time. If Leah Moore hadn't started on the main trail, then everything they assumed about her disappearance was wrong. The carefully planned search grid, the helicopter flyovers, the trail-focused ground teams, all of it had been looking in the wrong direction. Tom made the decision quickly, the kind of judgment call that separated effective commanders from those who got people killed. "We follow the dog." What they found wasn't a trail at all, but rather a faint game path that wound through dense undergrowth parallel to the main hiking route. It was rough terrain, fallen logs, thorny bushes, uneven footing that would slow any hiker significantly. Not the kind of route someone would choose for a casual day hike, especially not someone carrying camera equipment and planning to cover 11 miles. The vegetation was thick enough to block most of the morning light, creating a twilight atmosphere even in mid-morning. Water dripped constantly from overhead branches, and the ground squelched beneath their boots with each step. This wasn't the kind of terrain that appeared in tourist brochures or hiking guides. Kip moved with increasing urgency, his earlier professional calm giving way to something more intense. His ears were forward, tail stiff, every muscle in his body communicating focus and determination. Carly had worked with him long enough to recognize the signs. This wasn't just tracking anymore, this was pursuit. Something's changed, she called to Tom, who was struggling to keep up through the thick brush. His body language is different, more intense. Good different or bad different? Tom asked, ducking under a low-hanging branch. Urgent different, Carly replied, like he's found something, but it's not what we expected. They emerged onto a narrow ridge that offered the first clear view they'd had all morning. Below them, a steep ravine cut through the forest, its bottom hidden in shadows and mist. The drop was maybe 30 feet, steep enough to be dangerous, but not necessarily fatal. Kip stopped at the edge, his whole body rigid with alert. Tom joined him and peered down into the ravine. At first he saw nothing but rocks and fallen trees. Then a glint of metal caught his eye. Something reflective wedged between two boulders about 20 feet down, partially hidden by fallen leaves and debris. "We need to get down there," Tom said, already reaching for his rappelling gear. The equipment was standard for mountain rescue. Ropes, harnesses, carabiners that had been tested and retested for situations exactly like this. The descent was trickier than it looked from above. Loose rocks shifted underfoot, and wet leaves made every surface slippery. But Tom had done this hundreds of times, in weather both better and worse than this. When he reached the bottom, what he found confirmed their worst fears. A stainless steel water bottle, dented and scratched, with the initials LM etched into the side. It was the kind of personalization that outdoor enthusiasts often did to their gear, practical and sentimental at the same time. Nearby, a blue backpack lay torn open, its contents scattered across the rocky slope like the aftermath of an explosion. "Found her water bottle," Tom called up to the others, his voice echoing off the rock walls. "And her pack. She definitely came through here." But as he gathered the scattered items, something didn't add up. The backpack had been ripped open along the main zipper, but the damage wasn't consistent with a fall. Someone had gone through it deliberately, taking some things and leaving others. And there was blood on the rocks, dark stains that had dried to a rust color, but not enough for a fatal injury. Tom's radio crackled with Carly's voice. "Kip's alerting again. Strong alert, east of your position." Tom looked up to see the golden retriever straining against his leash, pulling away from the ravine toward denser forest. The dog's behavior had changed again, less methodical tracking, more urgent pursuit. His barks had taken on a different quality, almost frantic. "She was here," Tom radioed back, photographing the scene with his phone for evidence. "But she's not here now. Someone's been through her gear." "Someone took her," Carly replied, understanding immediately. The implications were chilling. This wasn't a simple hiking accident or someone getting lost in the fog. This was something much worse. The trail Kip followed led away from any marked path through terrain that would be impossible to navigate in the dark. Whoever had taken Leah knew these mountains well, well enough to move an injured person through dangerous terrain without leaving an obvious trail. The path wound through dense forest, following natural contours that suggested intimate familiarity with the landscape. They found the first real clue an hour later, when the game path intersected with an old logging road that didn't appear on any current maps. The gravel was overgrown with weeds and small saplings, but fresh tire tracks were clearly visible in the soft mud where water had pooled during recent rains. "Vehicle access," Tom observed grimly, kneeling to examine the tire patterns. Someone knew about this road, planned this. The implications were becoming clearer and more disturbing. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. Someone had deliberately lured or forced Leah away from the main trail to a location where they could access her with a vehicle. The level of planning suggested experience, possibly previous victims. Kip barely paused at the road before plunging into the forest on the other side. His pace had become almost frantic, and Carly had to run to keep up with him. The golden retriever moved like he was chasing something just out of sight, his training warring with instincts that seemed to understand they were running out of time. He's never acted like this, Carly called to Tom as they pushed through a particularly dense thicket. Not in training, not on our other finds. He's scared, but he won't stop. Scared of what? Tom asked, breathing hard from the exertion. I don't know, Carly admitted, but he knows something we don't. The old Forest Service shed appeared without warning, hidden so completely by overgrown vegetation that they almost walked past it. Only Kip's sudden stop and intense stare alerted them to its presence. The building was small, maybe 10 feet by 12, with a corrugated metal roof that had seen better decades. Ivy and blackberry vines had claimed most of the walls, creating perfect camouflage from aerial searches. Jesus, Jim Patterson whispered, catching up with them. How long has this been here? Decades, Tom replied, studying the structure. Forest Service used to have maintenance sheds scattered throughout the system. Most were removed or abandoned when they consolidated operations. Kip approached the shed door and began barking. Not the controlled alert bark of his training, but something more primal. His claws scraped against the wooden door as he tried to dig his way inside, leaving gouges in the weathered wood. Easy, boy, Carly soothed, but her own pulse was racing. She'd seen Kip work dozens of searches, and she'd never seen him react like this. There was something about this place that triggered every instinct he had. Tom examined the door more closely. The hasp was secured with a newer padlock, not the rusted hardware he'd expect on an abandoned building. Someone had been maintaining this place, keeping it secure for a reason. A few hard pulls with his crowbar snapped the rotted wood around the lock mechanism. The smell hit them immediately, stale air mixed with something organic and unpleasant. Not death exactly, but the smell of human occupation in an unventilated space. Tom's flashlight beam swept across the interior, revealing a space that had been recently occupied. A sleeping bag in one corner, still bearing the impression of a body. Empty food containers scattered on a makeshift table constructed from plywood and cinder blocks, a Coleman lantern that still contained fuel, and in the center of the room, hanging from a nail driven into a roof beam, a set of women's clothes. They were torn and blood-stained, the kind of damage consistent with a fall down a rocky slope. But they'd been arranged deliberately, displayed like a grotesque trophy. The hiking pants were shredded at the knee. The fleece jacket bore dark stains that could only be blood, and pinned to the wall beneath them was a handwritten note in block letters. She left. This is where he kept her, Carly whispered, understanding flooding through her as she took in the scene. The sleeping bag, the food containers, the clothes arranged like a message. It painted a picture of captivity that made her stomach turn. Tom was already on his radio, calling for backup and crime scene technicians. But Kip wasn't finished. The golden retriever had found something else, a small journal, wedged behind a loose board in the wall, its leather cover water damaged but still intact. Carly opened it carefully, her hands shaking as she read the cramped handwriting by flashlight. Day 1. I don't know where I am. The man says he found me after I fell, that he's helping me, but he locked the door when he left. Why would he lock the door if he's helping? Day 2. Tried to get out. Door is bolted from outside. There's a small window, but it's too high and too small. I can hear him moving around outside sometimes. He brings food, but won't answer my questions about getting help. Day 3. I think I hear scratching in the walls. Mice, maybe, or something bigger. When I scratch back, it stops, then starts again somewhere else. Day 4. The scratching came back. Definitely not mice. Something is trying to get in, or maybe trying to tell me something. I've been scratching back in patterns. Sometimes it responds. Day 5. He moved me again. Different place, higher up. I can see trees through gaps in the walls. The scratching followed me. How is that possible? The entry stopped abruptly after day 6, the final words trailing off mid-sentence. Kip, Carly said suddenly. understanding flooding through her. The scratching she heard, that was you, wasn't it? You found this place days ago, but we weren't here to listen. The golden retriever looked at her with those intelligent eyes, and for a moment she could swear he understood every word. His behavior at the shed suddenly made sense. He'd been here before, following Leah's scent, trying to alert anyone who would listen that someone was trapped inside. But they were too late. The shed was empty, except for the evidence of Leah's captivity. Whoever had taken her had moved her again, staying one step ahead of discovery. Kip was already at the back wall of the shed, pawing at a section where the boards didn't quite meet. Tom pulled them apart, revealing scratch marks on the inside, desperate gouges in the wood where someone had tried to claw their way to freedom. The marks were fresh, made by fingernails that had broken and bled in the attempt. Beyond the hole was forest again, thick and dark. But Kip's nose was working overtime, and his body language said everything. The trail continued. Leah had been moved, but she was still out there. They were still hunting. The afternoon sun had finally burned off the last of the morning fog when they found the hunting blind. It was military surplus, the kind of elevated structure used by serious hunters who could afford professional equipment. It was camouflaged so effectively that they walked within 10 feet of it before Kip's alert brought them to a stop. The structure was elevated about 12 feet off the ground, accessible only by a rope ladder, and completely invisible from any trail or road. Smart, Tom admitted grimly, studying the construction. Search planes would never spot this from the air. You'd have to know exactly where to look. The blind was positioned with tactical awareness, clear sight lines in multiple directions, escape routes through dense forest, close enough to the old logging road for vehicle access, but far enough away to avoid casual discovery. Kip's barking had taken on a different quality. Urgent, but controlled, like he was trying to communicate something specific. Carly recognized the pattern from their training. This wasn't just an alert for evidence or scent. This was a live find. "Leah!" Tom called out, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "Leah Moore! This is search and rescue!" The response was so faint they almost missed it. A voice, weak but unmistakably human, coming from inside the blind. The sound of someone who had been calling for help for so long that hope had almost died. "Help me!" Tom was up the rope ladder in seconds, Carly close behind. The interior of the blind was cramped but dry, with a small cot and supplies that suggested it had been prepared for long-term use. There were water containers, canned food, a chemical toilet, even a small propane heater. This wasn't a temporary shelter. This was a prison designed for extended captivity. And huddled in the corner, wrapped in a military surplus blanket, was Leah Moore. She was alive, but barely. Dehydrated, exhausted, with injuries from her original fall that had never been properly treated. Her face was gaunt, her lips cracked from dehydration, her eyes hollow with an exhaustion that went beyond physical fatigue. But when she saw Kip's golden head appear in the doorway, her eyes filled with tears. "I knew you'd come back," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I heard you at the shed. I knew someone would come." As they waited for the medical helicopter, Leah told them what had happened. She'd been hiking alone when she'd encountered a man on the trail, not wearing ranger or hiking gear, but casual clothes that seemed out of place in the wilderness. He'd been friendly, asking about her photography, commenting on her equipment. He seemed to know the area really well, Leah explained, her voice gaining strength as medical personnel worked to stabilize her. Said he was a local, offered to show me some spots that weren't on the tourist maps. I should have known better, but he seemed harmless. The man had led her away from the main trail, claiming there was a waterfall that would make for spectacular photographs. When they'd reached the ravine, he'd pushed her, not hard enough to kill, but hard enough to injure and disorient her. When I came to, he was going through my backpack, took my phone, my GPS, anything that could be used to call for help. He said I was too injured to make it out on my own, that he'd take care of me. The care had consisted of captivity, first in the shed, then in the hunting blind when she'd tried to escape. He'd brought food and water, but never explained what he intended to do with her long term. He said no one would ever find me up here, that people disappear in these mountains all the time, and nobody looks hard enough to find them. Leah's voice broke as she remembered. He had pictures of other people, other hikers. I think I wasn't the first. The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of what they'd stumbled onto. The man they arrested, a former Forest Service employee named Marcus Webb, had been using his knowledge of the mountain trail system to prey on solo hikers for years. The shed and hunting blind were just two of several hidden locations he'd prepared throughout the forest, each one designed for long-term captivity. Most disturbing were the photographs they found in his cabin. Dozens of pictures of hikers taken without their knowledge over many years. Some of the people in the photos matched descriptions of missing persons cases going back decades. The FBI was called in to coordinate with other jurisdictions, and cold cases across 3 states were reopened. But this time, Marcus Webb had made a mistake. He'd taken someone that people cared enough about to search for. He'd underestimated the determination of a search team that wouldn't give up. And most importantly, he'd never encountered a golden retriever who refused to stop looking. At the hospital, while Leah recovered from her ordeal, she asked to see Kip one more time. The reunion was quiet but profound. The woman who'd survived because she refused to give up hope, and the dog who'd followed an impossible trail to find her. "You never stopped looking," Leah said, burying her face in Kip's fur. The golden retriever sat perfectly still, as if understanding the importance of the moment. "Even when I thought no one would come, you never stopped looking." Carly watched from the doorway, tears in her eyes. She'd chosen search and rescue because she believed in second chances, in the possibility that the lost could be found. But she'd never seen such a perfect example of why the work mattered. Later, back at the station, Tom approached Carly with a cup of coffee and a satisfied smile. "Hell of a first big case, he said, settling into a chair across from her desk. "Hell of a partner," Carly replied, scratching Kip behind the ears. The golden retriever was tired but alert, still wearing his search vest like the professional he was. Even after hours of work, he remained ready for the next call. "You think he knew?" Tom asked, watching the dog with new respect. "How bad it was, I mean, that she was running out of time." Carly considered the question, thinking about all the ways Kip had deviated from his normal search behavior. The urgency, the determination, the way he'd seemed to understand that this wasn't just about finding someone who was lost. "I think he knew she was alive when everyone else would have given up," she said finally. "And I think that's what made all the difference." 3 months later, Carly received a package in the mail. Inside was a framed photograph of Eagle's Peak in autumn, the colors more vibrant than any tourist brochure could capture. With it was a note written in familiar handwriting. "For Kip and Carly, thank you for not giving up. I finally got my photograph and it's beautiful up there. But the most beautiful thing was seeing Kip's face when he found me. Some heroes have 4 legs and wet noses. I'm planning another hike next month, but this time I'm bringing backup and maybe a GPS tracker or 2. Love always, Leah." Carly hung the photograph in the SARE office where it served as a daily reminder of why they did the work. But she didn't need the reminder. Every time she suited up Kip for a search, every time they headed into the wilderness looking for someone who might be lost or hurt, or worse, she remembered the lesson Leah Moore had taught them. Sometimes, the only thing standing between lost and found is someone who cares enough to keep looking. And sometimes that someone has 4 legs and a nose that can track hope itself through the darkest forest. Have you ever experienced an animal's incredible intuition firsthand? The bond between search and rescue teams and their canine partners goes beyond training. It's built on trust, instinct, and an understanding that transcends human comprehension. Kip's determination to find Leah, even when the trail seemed impossible to follow, reminds us that sometimes the most important qualities can't be taught in any training program. What would you do if someone you loved went missing in the wilderness? Would you trust a search dog's instincts even when logic suggested giving up? The mountains hold countless secrets, but sometimes with the right partner, and enough determination, even the lost can be found. If this story of courage and partnership moved you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another incredible search and rescue story. Like this video to help us share these amazing tales of four-legged heroes with more people who appreciate the extraordinary bond between humans and dogs. Share this video with anyone who believes in second chances and the power of never giving up. Check out our other incredible canine hero stories appearing on your screen now. From drug detection saves to hostage rescues, these remarkable animals continue to prove that sometimes the greatest heroes walk on four legs. Until next time, remember that somewhere out there, a search and rescue team is training, preparing for the call that might mean the difference between someone coming home or staying lost forever. And at the heart of that team is a partnership between human and dog that represents the very best of what we can accomplish together.